Okay, so we're going to start, what is it, lab 6. So I want to do a little bit more with JSON. I usually give you a fairly simple JSON. I want to show you some more complicated JSON where you have to dig a little bit more down into it, and then show you sort of an interface thing called tkinter. So if you wanted a desktop interface for your Python, this is one thing that's available. Ultimately, in this course, our goal is to make web interfaces, but this is a sort of stopping off point, a sort of a desktop interface. So that's what we want to show. We're getting close to the point where we will end the material for test 1. I'll let you know when that happens, and then we will negotiate a time to have test 1. We'll decide whether it's a 1-day test or whether it's spread out over 2 days. So that's all coming. I had to produce over the weekend an attendance report, and all it was did you ever, that's all, that's the only question they asked me, did you ever attend? So everybody attended at least once, so that was fine. But I think another report is coming up soon, which is more some kind of a status report. And I know that I have this very lax, lenient policy where you can turn in things before the test and you're fine. But if I have to turn in that report, I will state where you are. So if you've done just one homework and no labs or something like that, that's what I will report. And you know you can make it up, and I know you can make it up. But if it goes to some coach or something like that, and that person panics that you're failing this course, then don't get angry with me. I'm telling you that that report may be coming up, and it was your decision to like behave badly. So if you don't want that problem, then turn in a few things. All right. If you get relatively close to what I asked for, you usually get 100 on these things, and I usually will tell you what didn't work or where you were off. But one of the reasons for the lenient late policy is that you will ask me questions. So you should only like turn in something that doesn't work if you just didn't realize it wasn't working. If you know it's not working, unless a test is around the corner, you should see me, since there's not a late penalty for coming in late, you should see me and get it figured straightened out. That's the sort of proper way to do it within this scheme. So I'm going to do slightly more complicated JSON and this tkinter interfacing. Are there any questions before we start that? Any questions on older stuff? Okay. So painting, that's the topic. It's about paintings. It's JSON, and I have a list within a list. So let's see that. So usually I just have a list. Sometimes I start with a list. Sometimes I start with an object. This is going to be even more complicated than that because they're going to be lists within lists. And then let me open up that code. There's painting, and there's the JSON we're going to read, and there's the Python program. Okay. So we're starting with an object, curly bracket. It has a key value pair. The key is painters. Painters, by square bracket, we know it's an array. So there's going to be a bunch of painters. A painter then the first painter is an object, and that has key value pairs like a last name, Manet, first name, Edouard, country icon, country name, birth date, death date. And then the painter has a property, a key, paintings is the key. And then that is an array. And then the painting is, each painting is an object. It's an object in Java. In JSON language, which is JavaScript, we would call this an object. In Python, we would call it a dictionary. Okay. An object in Python is sort of more complicated than this. So this is just a dictionary. But then it has a key value pair for the title of the painting and a key value pair for the file name. Okay. And then it just goes on from there. More paintings by Edouard Manet, and then that painting, that list of painting ends, then the Edouard Manet object ends, and then we start the next object, which is Georges Seurat. So again, we have overall, we have an object. That object just has one attribute, painters, which is an array of objects with properties like last name, first name, country icon, country name, birth date, death date. And paintings, the painting property of a painter is itself an array of painting objects which have attributes of title and file name. So we have a list within a list. Okay, so let's look at that. Let me run it and then show what happens. I'm going to run it. It lists the painters for me. So here said painter 1 was Edouard Manet, and here are his paintings. And I did the artists with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the paintings with A, B, C, D, just because I wanted to. And then it's going to ask me for an artist's number. Let's go with Gustav Klimt. So we'll say 4. And then enter a letter for a painting by that artist. So let's go with the Kiss. So let's go C. And then there it pops up in a browser, that painting. So that was fun. Okay, so let's see how that was done. So a comment, I am going to use JSON. I'm going to use the operating system because I'm reading a local file, and web browser. Probably should have put that import up with the other imports, but I didn't. Okay. Here's my usual operating system stuff where I'm making sure that I'm located in the file in my terminal is located where my program file is. Here's me opening and reading the JSON file. Now, before I read the file, got the text out of the file, and then converted, interpreted, or parsed, however you want to say it. I interpreted the contents of that file in using the JSON class. And that was sort of a two-step process, and it used the word loads with an S. Here I'm going more directly. I'm opening a file, and then I'm not, before in between I had to read the file step, and then I converted. Here I'm doing it in sort of one step. I'm working directly with the file, I'm loading it and parsing it as JSON. So last time I had an intermediate step, now I'm doing it, I don't know, looks more efficient, I don't know. I go back and forth. Okay, so now we have that JSON loaded. Art is that all that information loaded in and parsed into JSON. All the JSON information is now in art and expanded and given the appropriate types. So it was a dictionary. Overall, it's a dictionary, started with a curly bracket with one property. Then that first property, artists, is a list. It's a list of other dictionaries. One of the properties of those dictionaries is paintings, which is also a list. And then it's a list of paintings, which are dictionaries. So we have like a dictionary and a dictionary and a dictionary. We have, I think, 3 levels of dictionaries and 2 levels of lists. So welcome to JSON, it's fun. Okay, so I'm going to loop through, I have artists and there's a property of that called paintings, or sorry, painters. So that is, remember that the painters property is an array or a list. So I'm going to loop over that. I want in addition to the artist, I want a counter. So I use I, artist, and I said enumerate. So this is one way for me to set up a loop where I work through the dictionaries that are in the list. And I also have access to a counter. Remember, I wanted to say the first artist, the second artist, the third artist. I wanted to count through my artists. And so I wanted access to a counter. So here I am printing, and I'm printing as a coder, as you know, your index, you're sort of 0 based. So your first index is 0, but I didn't want to do that to my poor user. And so I added 1 here. And then later on, I'm going to subtract 1. When they tell me a number, I'm going to subtract 1. Before I tell them a number, I add 1 to it. So they start at 1. And then when they tell me a number, I subtract 1 from it before I use it. So there is my counter. Here's the artist's first name. There's the artist's last name. And I'm just printing out the artists. Then the next thing I'm doing is I have a nested for loop. And now I'm going to go through the paintings of that painter. So this is I'm enumerating again, because I want to label the paintings. This time I'm going to label them with a letter. But I want to go through the paintings of the painter. So I can I could work here with artist, because artist is the painter. So I could do this. I could do art painters I and then go to paintings. I think I can also put in here artist, because that is the object. So I think that would work either way. I did it probably the harder way, but that's the way I'm used to thinking. And so now I'm looping over the paintings. I have a different counter. This is what most people get wrong. You have an outer loop where I'm using I as the counter to count over the artist. And then I have an inner loop where I'm counting over the paintings of a particular painter, and I'm using the J there. From what I've seen, experienced when I've given this type of a problem to students in the past, they keep using the same counter, and then they keep getting, you'll get the first painting of the first artist and so on, but you won't get all of them. So, and you might end up out of range and have an error in your program. So this is a different counter, J. I'm now looping over the paintings, and I'm enumerating now the paintings object. And so I'm printing out, I'm taking the J counter, the painting counter, I'm adding 97 to it. 97 is a little a. And my first counter is 0. So on my first my first painting will be labeled with an A. I'm getting the character that corresponds to the number 97 plus J. So first round when J is 0, it's an A. Then the next time around when J is a 1, it'll be a B, a little b, and so on. And I am displaying, again, I have artist, painters I, which I think could just be artist here. Then I'm looking at the J painting of that artist, which I think could be painting, and then the title. So you can work with the I's and the J's, or you can work with the artist and the painting. So I tend to go back to the original. My art has painters, and I'm working with the Ike painter, and a painter has paintings, and I'm working with the Jake painting, and it has a title. But I also have artist and painting. So I think I could make this look a little less cumbersome by using, say, painting here and using, here I did use artist. But here I think I could use artist. Here I think I can go all the way and use painting and make it look a little cleaner. But I'm old-fashioned, what can I say? All right, so that made that big long list. And then I am prompting, and I'm putting this in a try. I'm asking them to tell me an integer. They may not send me an integer. If I say, tell me the artist number, and they write the person's name, then this will fail. But so that's why it's in a try catch. So I ask them for the artist number, and I put it in artist num. I ask for the letter of the artist. I put it in painting letter. In case they gave me a capital A when I wanted a small a or something, I put it into lowercase. I'm finding the file corresponding to that painter. And again, I tend to work from the all the way out. And here you can get away. Here you have these intermediate things because you're in the for loop. And so you name the particular artist of that iteration artist and the particular painting of that iteration painting. Down here, you're kind of stuck with the long loop. So I have my overall, I'm going to use the JavaScript language. I have the overall object with the property painters. Then I took the number they gave me and subtracted 1 because it's 0 based. And then I want the paintings of that painter. And then I took the letter that they gave me. I got the corresponding number. ORD gives me the corresponding number, the ASCII, if you will. And I subtract 79. So if they gave me a little a, ORD gives me 97, and I subtract 97 and I get 0. And then I want the file name of that painting. And then I printed out that to see if it worked. There it is, kiss.jpg. And then I opened a web browser. I imported the web browser, and then I opened a web browser, and I got these paintings at my site, http://www.sal.edu/blum C230 weeks art_JSON/ and then the name of the file. So that's where I happen to have them located, and that's what opened up the browser. Your lab is to work with a different JSON that's going to be off of the web, and it's going to be have a list within a list. So if you have a question about a list within a list, and you're not going to be doing any kind of dealing with, you're just going to do this upper part, sort of print out it's Nobel Prizes. So you're going to pick a prize and you're going to tell me who won the prize. And that sometimes one person wins, but up to 3 people, I think up to 3 people can win. So you're going to have some kind of loop. All right. Once, twice, 3 times. Any questions? No. All right. what else do I want to show you? Simpler JSON, but off of the web. And the beginning of this little tkinter, which is the interface. I think I don't spell it consistently. I have to figure out the right. All right, so I don't have a JSON file because you're getting the JSON from an API. So I'm going to show you that. So XKCD is a comic strip, but if you put in the address like this, then you are working with their API. And this is for their latest comic. And so here's the information on their latest comic. So it's in the month of 9, which is September. It's that's the number of the comic. So they produced 2,517 comics. It's in the year 2021. It's got a title. It's got an image. So that's one thing we'll be working with. There's a URL for the image for the comic. Okay. So this information is available by their API. Because if you're a comic strip for geeks, then you have an API, naturally enough. Okay. So I'm going to make the interfaces. So I'm going to import. There are lots of individual things I could import. So I'm sort of saying, just give them all to me. I'm going to parse what the API gives me is JSON. So I'm going to parse it as JSON. I'm going to make a web request, and then I'm going to pop up those images in a browser. So I'm going to get stuff from a browser. I'm going to put stuff in a browser. That stuff is JSON. And then I'm going to make my own little independent interface just because. Okay. Here's that URL. We just saw what was at that URL. I'm getting the data from that URL, and then I'm parsing it. So now I'm back to the two-step process. I'm getting the information and then parsing it as JSON. So comic info is that JSON info sort of unpacked. So it will be dictionaries and lists and what have you. I don't know if were there any lists on that. Maybe it was all just. So here I have up at the top in the comment. So it doesn't seem like there's any list. It just seems like one pretty much just great big object. So this is pretty simple as JSON goes. I'm printing out that JSON just to show myself that I've got it, my progress. I'm opening up the image. One of the properties of that object was the img, which was the URL. And so I'm popping up, this is for the latest comic. I'm popping up in a web browser that. Okay. And the comic number, there was a number property. This 2517 was the number property. And so I'm getting that number. And then I'm asking the user in a simple terminal, give me a number between 1 and that number. So let's look at one of the old comics. So give me a number between 1 and that number. And I'll call that the user's number. I'm going to put together a new URL. So now the original one had no number. Up here is for the latest. There's no number in the latest. But if you go back to a very similar address, but insert a number between the 2 slashes, then you will get the JSON for that number comic. Again, you're going to be doing a lab where you're going to be asking for Nobel Prize information. So you're going to say, which Nobel Prize? Did you want peace or chemistry or physics? What year? Did you want 2010, 2005? So you need to be able to put that information together and make your request. So typically when you're creating a URL to do an API request, there's some concatenating in there. Usually there's some user information that gets inserted into the address. So this is very common. We are opening the URL, reading it, decoding it, turning it into JSON. So now this is specifically a user comic rather than the latest comic. It's not the comic made by the user, but it's the user's chosen comic versus just the latest one. And again, I'm just printing out that information for that comic. I'm opening a web browser, this time with the user's comic information. And then here's me doing that very simple new interface thing. I'm making a tkinter. I'm creating a label for it. In that label, I'm putting the JSON information for that comic, and I am putting the label onto the interface. And this is a loop that keeps the interface up so that it doesn't close. The user can close it, but this sort of loop here keeps it running, keeps it open, keeps it up until it's closed. So this is sort of like an infinite loop that can be closed by the user clicking on the X and closing the interface. That's how most interfaces work. Okay. So let's run it. So here is this is the browser popped up with the image for the latest comic. So the latest comic is about the rover. Okay. Then down here in the interface, it's saying it gave me the information about that. Here's the information about the rover comic, the latest comic, and now it's asking me to enter a number between 1 and 2517. What number do you want? Thanks. 222. All right. And then here was the information printed out for the 222 comic, which is about something about small talk, and it was from 2007. Here's that information in this interface, this tkinter interface, and then here it popped up in the browser. Here's the image for that. All right. Questions? I'm going to show you more about the interface next, but this points out, even though the JSON was easy, this points out how to construct the URLs when you're working with APIs. It's mainly concatenation. You got to watch your slashes and such. Whatever the right, just make sure you're forming the right URL. So usually you print out the URL before you go trying to open it to make sure it has the right format. But that's probably like the most important line that, you know, the everything else we've sort of done before, except this is just, we'll do more in the next one. Well, I didn't even explain this, I just sort of did it. I'll explain it next. But this about how to put together a URL when you're working with an API is the real lesson to be learned from this example. Questions? It's all perfectly clear. All right. And then, not too many examples today. A more sophisticated interface. Okay. And these interfaces are like old, ugly looking things. You can make them nicer, but we'll worry about making things look nicer when we get to web interfaces, because that's our real Okay, I'll run it for you and then, so here's my hideous little interface. It says, I want you to choose a room, a day, and an hour. By default, it's choosing H120 on Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't want to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning, maybe 9:30. And I want to, I'm going to reserve Polaroid 120 for Monday at 9:30. Make the reservation. It says my reservation was accepted, and there it is in my list. If I tried to make another reservation for the same room, day, and time, it's going to tell me there's a conflict. But if I were to change the room, then that's okay. That's not a conflict. So it will add it. Again, if I try to go back, there's a conflict. I move to a different day. It's okay. So that is my wonderful little program here. Let's look at interfaces. These fairly simple interfaces. Okay. So we import the tkinter stuff. So that's the right spelling, otherwise it wouldn't import. This is the main sort of constructor here. You're making this tkinter, and it is like many interfaces, like a web interface. It's got a sort of a tree structure. You'll worry about who's the parent, what's inside of what. So you'll have containers and things inside of containers. So this is the root. This is the parent of them all. And I'm saying that it's a 400 by 400 of some unit pixels or something like pixels. Okay. I'm making here 3 frames. So I'm going to have 3 regions to my interface, sort of a top, a middle, and a bottom. I'm making a frame, which is a container, and its parent is root. So it's a container, but it has a container, and its container, the container of this container is root. Okay. So again, I can have containers within containers within containers, but right now I have my first 3 containers are called top frame, middle frame, and bottom frame. They all have root as a parent. So they're not inside one of us. They're not inside each other. They are siblings, and they all have the parent of root. And then pack is sort of get it ready to put on the page. And we're saying that this top frame is being put on the top. So I didn't have to specify these once I sort of started things in a sort of a vertical orientation, and these things sort of came underneath it. So that is me making sort of 3 regions for my interface. Here I'm making a label. So I've made a label. The label's its parent is the top frame, so I'm going to put it in the top frame. It's a label, so I give it some text. It's got a background color, which is like all on red, most of the green, a little less blue. I just edited when I didn't want to. So that is that beigey kind of color. And then my foreground, my font color is no red, a little bit of green, a little bit more blue. So this is like a dark blue. This is sort of like an orangey, beigey kind of a color. And what? Put it into the header and sort of start, fill it. So like fill it, there's X and there's Y. So X is horizontal. So we're sort of having it fill the space horizontally. Okay. So then I have a room label. It's also going in the top frame, and it says room, and then I switch these colors. So now this is going to be dark blue background with a sort of beige-like writing. And I'm putting that down, and I'm putting it on, starting off on the left. And then I'm going to, next to that, let me run it again so you see. So here was my big label at first, and then there was my little label for room, and now I'm making this drop-downy thing. So I say what the options were. The options for the room were H120, H153, H155. Those are the options. Then I make a variable for like the chosen option. So that's room. So here's me just saying I'm going to have a string variable, which will be the answer. And then I'm specifically setting it to the 0th option. So it's the H120 option. And then here's the construction of the drop-down list. It's called an option menu. I'm putting it in the top frame. What I get out of it is called room. And then the options are, remember the asterisk that we had before that drove us crazy? There it is again. That means take the list and get rid of the list structure and just put the things that were in the list sort of one after the other. So I could probably have just come in here instead of putting this star room options. I could have probably just come in here and said H120, H153, H155. But that created the drop-down list. And pack is sort of prepare it. So prepare it, and again, put it sort of, we're working now from the left. So put it from the left. And then it's a repeat. Do the day, a label for the day. Here are the options for the day. Make a variable for the day. Prepare it, put it on the page. And here's one for the hours, and here are the options for my hours. 8, 9:30, 11, 12:30, 2 to 3:30. Again, let me show you that. There is the room and the options. There's the day and the options. There's the hour label and the hour options. And I have a variable for each one. I have a variable for the day. I have a variable for the room. I have a variable for the hour that the user chose. So that's mostly the interface. I have a couple more labels to make, but that's the hard part of this interface was the drop-downs so far. Now for the logic of reservations, I make an array of reservations, a list of reservations, use the right language, it's Python. Make a list of reservations, there are none in the beginning. I'm going to have, this is the method, reserve is the method that's going to be called by the button. So I'm making a function, I'm calling it reserve. I'm putting together the room and the day and the hour using the get method. So room was associated with the dropdown for the rooms, day was the variable associated with the dropdown for, and I'm just getting those variables from the dropdowns. That association was made above. I'm looking to see if concat is in the list reservations. If it is, that means there's a conflict. If I put together a room, a day, and an hour, and it's in my list, in the beginning, nothing's in my list, but this function is going to be called more than once. So if my room, day, hour concatenation is in the list, then there's a conflict. I'm just going to yell there's a conflict and not do anything more. But if there's not a conflict, then I'm going to display that the reservation is accepted. Here I displayed it was that there was a conflict. Here I'm displaying it was okay. I'm appending it to my reservations so that nobody tries to take that room again. And I'm displaying the reservations here. So I have a reserve action config, and that's going to display whether or not it was what they just tried to add was a bad conflict or good accepted. And then the actual reservations are going to be shown in my reservation label. That's my function. Here's my button, and I'm putting it in my middle frame. It says make a reservation. its command is the function reserve, which we just talked about. And here's us putting it onto the page. And then I made a header that just says reservations. Then I made a header for, this is for the action. So this is going to say, in the beginning, it just says blank, 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 but later on, it sometimes says there's conflict or reservation accepted. And then down here, reserve label is my list of reservations. So here, reserve label is this list of reservations. The reserve action is this pink thing. There was a label at the top that just said reservations. That's here, 77 and 78. So that's my bottom region. This was my middle region. This was my top region. So very primitive looking interface, but it's better than a terminal. It's kind of crappy looking. We'll do better when we get to web stuff. But we're not going to worry a lot about design, but we'll do a little bit better. But it's got more control than a terminal. I have a drop-down list. The person for the rooms can only choose 120 or 153 or 155. We've controlled the rooms that they can enter. So we don't have to worry about, oh, what if they typed that room across from the main office? They can't do that. We've controlled what they can enter. That's the nice thing about designing interfaces, is to control the user. Because when we were doing, we didn't worry too much about when we were in the terminal, what happens if the user enters the wrong stuff? Because that's not our end goal of terminal, working with terminals. We want to get away from terminals. This is our first step away from terminals. Any questions? Because now it's your turn. You're going to make an interface. Let's show you what you have to do. That's homework. I didn't want that. There's this interface that tells you about Nobel Prizes. So you're going to make a year and a category. So I don't know, you'll say Nobel Prize. And then you'll say category. And then you'll have a little drop down for categories, piece or something. And then you'll say the year. This looks terrible, but and another little drop down. And then you'll say, show me. And then you'll list who won the prize. So maybe it starts with 2000. And then you'll list like the first name and last name of the person who won the prize. And that JSON, here's one of the examples. So there's a prizes is one of the, so you have an object. I didn't make this one. Somebody else made this one, but you can see some of the stuff I give you is like the stuff in real life. Here's prizes, which is an array or a list. So there are many prizes they give in a year. Even if you only asked for one prize, We're only asking for one prize. But it's possible for you to say, give me all the prizes or send me 2 prizes. And so they send you prizes as an array, as a list. And then, so here's the prize, which was the year 2000 and physics. And then there's a property of laureates. So the people who win the prize are known as laureates. And that is an array. And here's the first name and the last name of one of the people, and it's an array. So here's the first name and last name of somebody else, and the first name and the last name of somebody else. So those are the people. So in this case, for physics in the year 2000, 3 people shared the prize. So you should show me three names. But it's a list within a list. So you're combining artists. You have to construct the URL, which has physics. So you have to make an interface that has these options. That's like the 3rd program I showed you. You have to put together the prize, Peace Prize in the year 2000. You have to put that together to construct a URL. That's like the 2nd program I showed you. And then the JSON that you get has a list within a list. That's like the 1st program I showed you. So I've given you the pieces, putting them together. That's not always an easy job. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm telling you explicitly, I've given you all the pieces. Now you put them together. Questions? I will stop recording.